Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. This is part 4 of the riding the Spyder around the Goulburn district, and in this clip, which will be 17 and a bit minutes long, I'm riding into the little village. At the beginning I'm coming into the little village or township of Bungendore, which is northeast of Queanbeyan, and from there I'll be continuing south. Once I've gone through the little village of Bungendore, which you won't see much of, I'll be continuing south to Queanbeyan. Queanbeyan's a city of about 40,000 people, I think. It's often thought of as a satellite of Canberra, but it's in New South Wales and it's a city of its own in its own right. As in the other videos, I talk about lots of interesting things. I hope they're interesting. And the first thing I always sort of talk about is the state of the road, and in this part of the video you'll see that some parts of the road are in much better condition than what you've seen up to this point, but there are still some parts where there needs to be lots of work. I'm grateful to one of my viewers, a lady called Purple on 3, who has her own YouTube channel. And if you search for Purple on 3 you'll find her. She, I guess she's called Purple on 3 because she loves the colour purple, and she has a trike, she has a Spyder, and she rides around in the United States. I think she's from Pennsylvania, but I don't want to misquote her. And she makes videos about her Spyder journeys. And I'm grateful to her because she watched the last video I posted and told me a couple of things about motorcycling in relation to the United States. One of those was in relation to an organisation called the Motorcycle Safety Foundation that I had mentioned. You'll recall I was talking about another fellow who runs a YouTube channel called MC Forum, and he's an MCF, that is Motorcycle Foundation qualified instructor. And I stated in the video that I thought, or I assumed, that in all states in America you were required to take an MSF course before you could get the required paperwork to ride a motorcycle. And as I say, Purple on 3 was very kind to point out to me that that's not the case, that it's a matter, in some states you don't have to do that, and that's a matter of legislation and rules that are in various states, and I'm sure there are good reasons why they have such rules, and it's not my job to question those or to cast any aspersions one way or the other. I'm just stating the fact that I had said that you had to take this course, and that is incorrect, and I wanted to correct that record as quickly as I could rather than give a false impression. The other thing she mentioned to me was that I talked about the markings on the road, and I mentioned the white stripes that are down the sides of the road to mark where the edges of the road are. She informed me that in the United States, or where she comes from, they call them fog strips. I think they have various names in Australia. In some cases they're just a painted white line. You see a truck going along with a crew, and they paint that line, and they paint the lines down the middle of the road that tell you whether it's safe to overtake, or double white lines for not safe to overtake, and so on. But in other parts and on some highways, there are a series of it's almost like a strip that's laid down and glued somehow with heat, I think, to the road, and it's like a series of corrugations and bumps. And I think they're an added safety feature, because in the worst case scenario, because if you're riding along at night and you feel a bit drowsy, of course you should stop, and you should stop riding or driving or whatever it is. But if in the worst case you feel a bit drowsy and your car or bike starts to wander to the side of the road, when it comes on those strips they'll make a loud noise as you go across them, and that'll suddenly jolt you awake. If that happens to you, then even if you are jolted awake, pull over to the side of the road, take a short nap if necessary, get out of the car, walk around, get some fresh air, something or other. Don't just continue to drive, because if you're drowsy, it's likely that you'll get drowsy again, and of course nobody wants the inevitable outcome of that kind of thing. So having cleared up, I hope, that matter of the MSF, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I understand is the situation in Australia in regard to motorcycle licensing. It is my understanding that in all states of Australia, all states and territories, in order for you to get a permit to ride a motorcycle, you have to take a stay upright course. Now the stay upright course I think is conducted over 2 days, and it's the fundamentals of how to handle a motorcycle at low speed, how to start it, how to stop it, how to use the clutch and gears if you've not ridden a manual or driven a manual car. You can take the test on your own bike if you want, or you can, in New South Wales, certainly the one that's closest to me, you can hire a bike from the people there. Of course there's a charge for that, but it's probably better if you do it with their bike, because they're like little light, nice, I think Honda 250s or about that size, so they're not heavy bikes to manoeuvre. If you were going to take the test on a scooter, you can do that, and when you get your license, if you go for it on a scooter, you will get an automatic notation on your license, the same as you do when you go for your test in an automatic car. That is because scooters rather have what's called a CVT, or constant variable transmission, which is almost an automatic transmission. You twist and go and the bike changes gears for itself. So if you take the test on a scooter, you'll have an endorsement on your license that says automatic only, and you're not allowed to ride a manual bike if you have that endorsement, but you can do it on a scooter. And so you take the stay upright course, and if you pass that, they give you the appropriate paperwork. Then you go to the licensing authority, which in New South Wales is Services New South Wales, and you have to take a road rules test. And if you pass that, they give you a learner's permit, and you're allowed to ride your motorcycle on the road. While you're on a learner's permit, you are not allowed to ride anything bigger in New South Wales than a 660cc, and you also anything greater than a 150 kilowatts power to weight ratio, based on the weight of an average person being 90 kilograms. In Queensland, I know, for example, that on top of all those restrictions, you have to have a licensed rider with you when you're out on the road. Now, how that's policed in practice, I'm not quite sure. You could say, well, when I started out, he was behind me, or I was following my licensed rider, but he went through those lights and the light turned red, and I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's up ahead waiting for me. So as I said, I don't know how that thing is policed in practice, but that's the rule. You have to hold your permit for a certain period of time. In other words, you can't get your learner's permit one day and say, I'll go for my licence the next day. You've got to hold it for a certain period of time. I'm not sure what that is. And then you have to take another set of tests, which involve starting your bike, stopping your bike, and weaving in and out of the cones and so on. And if you pass all those things, then you're given a provisional licence. You'll have a red P, I think, for 1 year, and then you might have a green P for provisional licence for 2 years, and then I think you go on to a full licence. And it's not until you get the full licence that the restrictions on power to weight ratio or size of bike cease to be a factor. Now, one of the things that I thought was an anomaly in the law, but in doing some research for this video, I found that it's not the case, is that my Spyder, for purposes of registration and insurance and all those sorts of classification, is classified as a motorcycle. And therefore, even though it's a three-wheel machine that's quite stable, even if you were saying, well, I'm only ever going to ride a Spyder, you have to take the stay upright course in order to be able to drive it on the road. You have to wear a helmet, and as I say, for the purposes of registration and insurance, it's classified as a motorcycle. The anomaly, I thought, was that the traditional type trikes, that is the ones with the one wheel at the front and the two wheels at the back, that are brands like Ray Wecco and Bond trike, and are based generally on VW or Ford engines. I have seen some of those advertised for sale, and I've seen statements with the bikes, if that's the right word for them, saying that they can be driven on a car licence. And I thought that was an anomaly in the law that didn't make any sense, because you still have to wear a helmet. There is still no body protection. I mean, you basically got two wheels at the back and one at the front, and then there's just you. There's the same openness around you as there is on a Spyder or on any other motorcycle. But I discovered that the law, certainly in New South Wales, was changed in 2013, and these trikes are now classified as motorcycles. If you got your licence before 2013, then you could still, that is your motorcycle licence, I think, you could still ride your trike on a car licence. But if you were after 2013, if you purchased your trike after 2013, you have to take the stay upright course before you can ride it. Now, it's important here that I clarify that you should check in each state or territory exactly what the rules are, because I see sometimes people have these trikes as businesses and they do tours on them. I've never actually ridden one or driven one. I've ridden in one. I was on holiday in South Australia once, and at a place called Victor Harbour, there was a bloke who had a business, and he said, well, I give you half-hour, 1 hour tours of Victor Harbour. You hop on the back of the trike, you put on a helmet. His was a 3-seater at the back, so there was space for myself, my wife and our granddaughter who was with us, and he had seatbelts for the three of us, so we put our seatbelts on, and he rode us around Victor Harbour, and we had intercoms in the helmet so he could talk to us about the scenery and things that we were seeing and so on. And I see sometimes that those businesses are for sale. So it's important that you check in whichever state or territory that you live in to determine exactly what the licensing requirements are. But I know that in New South Wales, because I checked doing the research for this video, and in Victoria, they are now classified as motorcycles because they have handlebars. And I think in Victoria they say there is no floor pan in front of the rider. So they're classified as motorcycles. So you need a motorcycle licence. And if you've not ridden a motorcycle before, you would have to do the stay upright course. And I would imagine that you would not, because of the restriction on the power to weight ratio and the engine size, you would not be able to ride one while you were on your provisional learner's permit or on your provisional licence. It's only when you had a full permit. So please, if you're considering buying a trike, then check the licensing requirements in the state or territory where you live. Check also the requirements in terms of whether they are LAMs. LAM stands for Learner Approved Motorcycle Scheme. I can say, for example, that the Spyder, even the one I have, it's a 1000cc engine. The current configuration is a 1330, but even the one I have, the 1000cc, is not learner approved. So I would imagine, since most of those trikes are based on car engines, VW 1.6, 1.8, or sometimes Ford engines that are 2-litre engines, they would not be learner approved. So I guess the only point I'm trying to make there is be very careful if you're thinking of buying one of these trikes and you see a business for sale and think, I'd like to do that, and it would be a good income earner and I could be fun doing that. Do some thorough research and find out exactly what are the licensing requirements in the state where you live, and what are the requirements in terms of LAM's approval for that machine. That said, when I made a video when I was considering what machine to buy to replace my Kawasaki Voyager. I made a video about all the choices there were and the things that I thought I would get and the things that I rejected. And I had at one point thought about those traditional trikes with the one wheel at the front and the two wheels at the back. And I discounted them for two reasons. First of all, they're just huge, long wheelbase things, and I didn't really want something that big. It's going to be hard to fit in my yard and find a cover for it. I don't have a garage or a carport to put it in, so it's going to be hard to fit in my yard and find a cover for it. But secondly, I have seen some video where in the wrong sort of conditions, that is in high wind, where the wind is blowing in the rider's face, there is a possibility of the front wheel of that machine lifting. Now, some people might say that's a 1 in a million chance and it's a rarity, but the fact is I've seen it happen. There are videos on YouTube where you can see people have either done it on purpose or it's been done as a result of them riding it in the wrong sort of conditions, as I say, with the high wind blowing into their face. And whilst the people who ride them might say, well, yes, it happened to me, but I was in control and I knew what I was doing, I can imagine the first couple of times it happened to you was very, very disconcerting and quite scary, I would think. Partly the reason for that happening, I guess, is because that the full weight of the vehicle is at the back. The engine and the transmission are behind the rider, whereas with most bikes, it's underneath or evenly balanced between the front and rear axles, or front and rear wheels. So, for example, with the Kawasaki Voyager, the engine is underneath the rider. Engine and transmission are sit underneath the rider. With the Spyder, the engine is kind of, part of it is sort of just in front of the rider, but quite a sizable portion of it is also underneath the rider. And because it's got a semi-automatic transmission, the paddle shifter transmission, it's quite a big transmission. It sits underneath the rider, so the weight is distributed evenly across the chassis of the body, or the body of the bike, if that's what you want to call it. Whereas with the one wheel at the front type of trike, and I think this is also true of the Harley. I'm not sure what I think it's called Super Glide or something like that. The one with the one wheel at the front and the two at the back. Most of the weight of the bike is at the back, but the engine of the Harley is underneath the rider. So anyway, the reason I think that those bikes do have a tendency to lift in high wind is because the engine and transmission are at the back of the bike and all the weight is at the back of the bike, and there's practically nothing but the front wheel and a bit of steel and chrome that's a platform for the rider to put their feet and stand on when they get on the bike around the front. So it's not a lot to keep it down in low wind. So I rejected those trikes for that reason. I really wanted a Spyder in any case, so I just thought it's a more stable machine and more suitable for someone who wants to do the kind of riding that I want to do. So there's some thoughts about licensing requirements in the state where you live as opposed to licensing in some other parts of the world. In Australia, wearing helmets is mandatory in all states and territories, whereas I know that in some parts of the United States it isn't. And again, that's a matter of, I guess, the local laws, and not my job to make any judgments about that and say whether it's right or wrong. We do know that helmets will reduce the severity of head injuries. They won't completely prevent a head injury. They'll just reduce the severity of the head injury. And a full face helmet is thought to be better than an open face helmet. Helmets in Australia have to meet Department of Transport. They have to meet Australian standards and be approved. So there's some things for you to think about. Well, again, I'm not trying to tell people what to do. I'm just trying to raise people's thinking and awareness about issues related to motorcycling. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope I'll be talking to you when I make the next video.